Hello, hello, JJ DiGeronimo here. I just love these meetups with all of you, the conversations, the visitors, the guests, their work and their journey is so inspiring to me. And I'm so excited to have Rebecca Paris with me today. Hello, Rebecca.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, this is so exciting because these conversations of really breaking out of what you should be doing into what you know you could be doing is so exciting. So I know we're going to talk about stepping out of your ego, which for many of us is such a big step into stepping into our gifts. But I
Mhm.
just want to say how much I love that you share your journey as a professional and how you've shifted into this work. So I
Mhm.
definitely want to get into that. But before we do, let's just talk about what the word ego means to you.
Yes. Well, I guess it's easiest to describe. Somebody used the analogy of a snowflake. So, our divine self can be thought of as our unique imprint, our essence, kind of our soul gifts, our divine, spark of the divine. So, the snowflake is here. And what happens when in utero and through mainly our first 7 years of life, we get imprinted with what society is telling us. And so if you can think of your snowflake, this beautiful imprint full of light, right? And then think of sticky notes being put on your snowflake. Like it could be you need to be a good girl, or you need to make good grades, or why are you always bothering me, or you're such a pain. And those sticky notes could actually be from the ancestors that you came in with from your DNA. But the sticky notes are like the ego. There's those programming that our society is saying you need to be like this, and it's not necessarily your snowflake. So what happens is all the light that was coming through your snowflakes starts getting covered up and covered up and covered up with the programming of what your parents want you to be or what society is telling you to be. And then when you start identifying with those sticky notes, that's really where the ego comes in. So it's just really the inorganic part of you that's trying to fit into this world that maybe not so healthy.
That is so lovely. I've never heard that before. And I think that not only shows the gravity of these messages that we carry with us, but the ability to take off those sticky notes.
Absolutely.
Mm. And I think to me, one of the things I think about when I think about ego is it's kind of the energy that comes with your humanness. And so you get a teardrop of divine is dropped into your body, your eyes turn on. And the energy of the ego is part of the human experience. And really, our goal is to kind of be able to work around that energy in a way that allows us to shine brighter.
Absolutely. I see as it's important to integrate it. The ego is almost like it's what you could call your personality matrix. And it has all those identities. Like when someone says, "Who are you?" Well, I'm an accountant, or I'm a vegan, or identify as I'm a mother. And all those are just labels that are just for the ego. And it's really not your divine self that's here to express all your beautiful gifts. So, and I believe integrating it, not fighting it, is very important. And you really need to allow your higher self to come in and really guide you, because the ego is really run by fear and the divine self is run by love and your highest good. So when you're feeling contracted, that's more your ego, or when you're in your mind, the mind is where the ego comes from. The heart and the rest of the body often are picking up the divine signals of your divine self.
Love that because that's really where I wanted to take this is like, okay, you have your ego, and then you want to embody your divine self. So can you do it together? Is it kind of like sand match over here where you're rolling around? Like how does that actually help where you embody your divine self? Like how do you get to that divine self? Because so
Yeah.
many of us are stuck in this ego energy. So how does that manifest?
Well, it can happen over a period of years, but a lot of times the ego is set in place through almost like emotional trauma, and you're stuck in places. Like you could be stuck in childhood at age 7, and that 7-year-old self comes out to play. It's trying to be heard because a lot of times we just kind of break into almost these parts. We have protector parts and we have these parts that they didn't get their needs met. So because we got so programmed between age 1 and 7 with the theta brain state to figure out how do I do this, it's so hard. Now as an adult, you're like, oh, you have to start recognizing your programs for one, but not just being aware and circling in, well, I'm like this because of this. It's really a matter of it's breaking out of those patterns by first awareness. And a lot of times that can happen in the pause. So let's say you're really upset about something and you're like, I shouldn't really be that upset about this instance because it's not that big a deal. And then you kind of get some awareness, like, I know why I'm so upset because I feel like I need to control the situation to feel safe because I didn't feel safe at so and so. So then it's really pausing, and instead of that automatic reaction to the person, it's really allowing a response. And what that does neurologically is, you might have heard Joe Dispenza talk about the neurons that fire together, wire together. And what happens is you can get, like, if you're in total reaction mode, these just kind of you're on autopilot because these are reactions and you don't even get a chance to breathe. But the idea is you take that pause and you breathe, and then you're not allowing that just to automatically fire. You're creating your response to it, which helps you break out of that automatic programming and the ego, and allows your higher self to come in and say, do we really want to, react like this? I see my childhood wounded self coming on board. And now my adult self is going to say, it's okay. I understand why you're reacting like that, but now I'm going to make a different choice.
So powerful. And now not everyone just walks around starting to talk about Joe Dispenza, right? It's definitely a frequency. So how did you get on this frequency? How did you get into this work where you're talking about sidestepping the ego and working with your divine self?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I grew up with very little religious or spiritual background. I was a very pragmatic, very nice family, but there was just nothing there. And so I wasn't really steeped in it from a child. I was doing the normal thing, the corporate job, like I was told, you got to go to school, got to get education, get a job. So I was doing, and I think you had talked about it from what I listened to in your interview or the start of this season, the masculine energy. And that's, we're taught, even though they don't call it masculine energy, it is that go-getter. Like you go and achieve and get the good job and make the money and marry the great husband and have kids. So that's your program. So I'm like, okay, if that's the program, I'm going for it. And so I did, and I did really well with that, what I call the matrix program, the 3D matrix program. And then you're at the top of that hill and you're like, wait a minute. So if this was, where it's supposed to be, something still is not feeling whole inside. There's something more. It's not about money and ego success. And, I ended up, had very successful career in advertising. I was VP of marketing and communications at United Way of Atlanta at age 28. And then I left to have children. And I guess that my children were my biggest teachers because they were very sensitive souls. They came in like on a different level than I did. And so they're teaching me because they're not fitting in this little programmed world that I had, assumed that they would. Like it's going to private school and doing all the things. And they're like, they didn't really seamlessly fit into the world that I had imagined for them. And so that opened up that, why does everybody have to be so homogeneous? I mean, the idea is there's these diverse kids, and why aren't the gifts and the diversity celebrated in school systems? So the school systems can be indoctrination a little bit. So I really went through a lot of hard times, really trying to figure out the best path for the children, and then became an artist. All of a sudden, that right brain started coming online, and I didn't know that I could paint, but then just became a portrait artist just by really self-taught, or it was just channeled in, I don't know what, but that helped balance me from the masculine to the feminine. So that was kind of the start of it before the awakening, and that might probably the next question or so.
Love that shift. And I love the fact that you're listening, right? Like, I've had a lot of people come to me and be like, I feel like I should go to the craft store. I'm like, well, go. But I think a lot of us block ourselves when we get the messages or the intuition to sort of start working on the other side of the brain. And so the fact that you leaned into that. And on your Instagram, I mean, you have just beautiful, beautiful pieces. And I really love that message because I think it inspires people to do what is calling them, even if it seems a little crazy or how could I do that? Or I've never had formal training, but you're being called to do that. And I love how you've stepped into that because I feel like that alone is such a message for people listening is what is calling you? What is calling you? And if the matrix isn't working for you, which for many light workers, that happens, right? Things happen and you start to look around and be like, why am I here? What is all of this?
Right. Definitely. I would describe my journey as following, like my friend laughs at me, but I'm like, I just followed the breadcrumbs. So there was a moment where I shifted out of the matrix mentality and I had an opening. And that opening was on a walk with my dog, and I was on the phone with one of my family members, and she was describing a situation with two of her friends that could not be explained in any 3D version, like of how things happen. It wasn't a coincidence. It has to be more of a energetic, something supernatural that had happened. And then it opened me up to really ask myself two questions. And once you have the opening, you're like, oh, how does energy, and the two questions were, how does energy between people and all things relate and work and flow? And what do all religions throughout time and throughout culture have in common? So my higher self dropped those two questions in. And then I opened up more saying, well, why should I trust just my five senses? So the example is, we can't hear a dog whistle, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So it opened me up to say there's things that are just outside of my frequency range that even though I can't touch and feel and see them right now, it doesn't mean they're not there. So it opened me up to that level of, okay, I see that there's this greater world out there that's not chaos, but it's just naturally unfolding in a beautiful, prescribed way.
That is amazing. And so is that when Gene's keys came forward for you, or how did you tap into the Gene keys?
Yeah, it came pretty quickly. So my best friend here, who is also named Rebecca, and she's the one I have the course with, actually. She and I were kind of on the same path. So she was a therapist, and then we just started, together opening some of these doors and about energy. And she found Touch for Health, which is an energy system. And I'm like, do you believe in meridian? She's like, yeah, I think I do. That was one of the first questions. And then we just kind of grew together, and she started working for us a kinesiology, like specialized kinesiology, which is muscle testing, so you can learn so much from if your muscle goes strong or weak. And she found the Gene Keys found her, and then I got very interested in it because it was a perfect mix for me, because I really like to mix the science and the spirituality in the left brain and the right brain, because I have this science part of me that's kind of coming online. And I'm like, well, how does this actually fit with the actual DNA in the body? So Gene Keys was great because it worked on both sides, the right and the left side. And Gene Keys is, not many people have heard of this, but they have heard of human design. I don't know. Have you heard of human design? Yeah. And the I Ching. So really,
Yes.
So Richard Rudd was he brought in the Gene Keys. He was a student of human design. He's worked with Ra Uru, who the founder of human design, and wrote books, about human design. And then he got this download, like 3 days of download, and he really stood on the shoulders of that to take it to the next level. And it ended up being the Gene Keys. And it's using the 64 archetypes of the I Ching, the astrology, the human design part, but then he just put it into a format where you can really use some words to describe like what your highest purpose is, or what your purpose is, your life's work, your evolution, which is your biggest challenge, and your radiance. Those are your core genius. But they all have different levels. So like if you're really in your lower frequencies, you're in the shadow, but you're still on the same polarity, like you're still in that same key, but you're at the lowest level of the key, which and it's fine because that's really the seed of the gift. It's where it starts. So you're in the shadow, but then when you raise your frequency, then you start bringing in more of your gift frequencies there. So for example, my life's work, which is like what I'm here to do in the outer world, goes from dislocation to orientation to unity. And it's the prime feminine key. So here I am doing all this masculine stuff, but my life's work is to be unity, to find unity, to connect with just being and just the prime feminine, right? But the shadow shows up as dislocation, where I'm like always kind of feeling lost, and like I get lost driving somewhere, and it really bothers me more than other people. I'm like, oh, that's that dislocation, not knowing where I am. So you can, when you do your gene keys, you're like, oh, so no wonder that's why I struggle with that, or why that feels so resonant. So that's a little bit about the gene keys. I don't know if that answered anything or.
And I think for everybody, we all do strength finders or Myers-Briggs as part of our corporate life, but I'm a big believer in knowing your birth chart, knowing your human design, knowing your numerology, doing your gene keys, understanding your channels. I think for many of us, there's so much knowledge out there that could truly help us love ourselves more, allow ourselves to expand, and realize that we are not alone and that this is an experience for us. And every tool that I talk about here on Together We Seek is a tool that I've used myself. And the reason I do this podcast is because I want to share how normal it is to use this information as part of your toolkit so that you can align to higher frequencies and more of your life's work.
Absolutely. And it helps people feel a little bit better about some of their shadows. Let's say they might, like, one of the keys is addiction, is the shadow. And then they're feeling like, oh, I made all these mistakes. Why did I do it? And you're like, this is your birth chart. This is what you were imprinted with at birth. This is the path that you were, that you're walking. So don't feel so guilty about like the path you walk, because it was kind of like your journey. Journey of Souls talks about, how you come in with, this is what I want to learn in this lifetime, or master.
Yes, yes. And that's why I do these conversations, because I like the journey of the light worker, healer, mystic, because we all had to find our way to. And no matter where you are in your journey, the fact that you may be listening to this conversation is you have the ability to do what many of the guests are doing now. That is in your wheelhouse because you are attracted to this frequency. And I think for many of us, the reason I love talking to you, Rebecca, about the ego is oftentimes that is our biggest stepping stone to get into our life's work, is to remove some of those sticky notes to say, you're religious or you're not religious, or you believe in God or you don't believe in God, or you can do it or you can't do it. Whatever your sticky note says, being able to recognize the stories you have on replay, the things that are holding you back, and slowly detach those sticky notes so that you can go to the craft store. You can be open to the messages your friends are giving you. When your friend's doing gene keys and it excites you, that is an indicator that you should check it out too.
Absolutely. I love how the universe gives you messages. So the biggest message for me was when I was first starting to awaken, and I was in kind of this country club kind of environment where you don't really think of people who are spiritual and woo-woo, but I knew a couple other people that were open to it just from the things that they've said. So I was talking to them about it, and then 3 people within 2 weeks said, well, why don't you start a spiritual book club? So like the third person that said that, I'm like, okay, I hear this breadcrumb just being dropped really hard in my field. And it's like, okay, that's the next thing I need to do. I was in a book club for 20 years. I founded certain things about it and kept it going through all the correspondence. I'm like, but at this point it's like, okay, so a book club. So that's how Raising the Vibe started. And now it's a website that's really there for you to provide a list of all the tools, or many of the tools, to help you awaken, to find yourself, to heal yourself, and to ascend. But it started as a group and a book club. Then it morphed into, a year later, into a nonprofit. And I just kept listening and, just saying, well, what's being asked of me now? And, having speakers come in and talk about human design or the Akashic records. And it just really started opening people up. And then COVID hit. So at that point, we stopped doing the group meetings, and I really I felt like I need to put a lot of effort into the website so it can be for everybody, all these tools. And then that's when I really got the urge that I needed to leave Atlanta. I consciously uncoupled from a 27-year marriage, which was obviously that's so hard to do, but my soul was calling so hard to say, it just kept saying, you have a purpose, you have a purpose. And my ex-husband, I've been telling him, so excited about all of this stuff and having him read The Biology of Belief, because I figured that would help transition, the science into the woo-woo a little bit. And it just wasn't his path to go there with me. And I felt I needed to step out of the old me. And I just heard, Asheville, and my friend was here. So I just, again, followed that lead. It's just those subtle things that open you up. You're like, does this feel expansive or not? Yeah. And I came to visit, and the mountains, just driving, seeing the mountains, like, I feel expansive. How do I feel in my body about that is how you need to ask yourself if it's the ego or the divine self. If you feel expansive and joyful, that's your divine self saying, this is the path. And I just followed it. And I left during COVID, and didn't really say a whole lot, and just kind of walked out the door. And my young adult children did follow me. But I haven't regretted it. I feel like the most important relationship you have is with your soul. And if you don't do what you came to earth to do, then it doesn't make any sense. If you just stick with a marriage because you want to be loyal, that's just more of an enslavement program versus honoring yourself.
So inspiring. I feel like this is going to reach so many people, especially the people that need to hear it. And I think you're such an inspiration for people on their journey, regardless of where they are, seeing the steps that you've taken and what you've leaned into and how you've leaned into them. The fact that you've been able to create community. And I'd love to hear about your online course. And I'm going to send you books for your spiritual book club, because I just released my third book, Seeking, which is all about
Awesome.
sidestepping the ego and aligning with your true life's work. So I'm going to send you some for your book club.
Perfect.
Yes. And then, how can people reach out to you? How can they work with you? What what do you have up your sleeve?
Perfect. The best place, I think it's in the, under the link below, but RebeccaParis.com is the easiest. And I do one-on-one coaching. And some people like to start with their gene keys. So if they really, want to learn about what their genius is and how they can step into that, or get clarity on what their biggest challenge is and where they are, or what their attraction field is. Because you have this attraction field that's in your gene keys, and it's called the Venus sequence. It's this whole Venus sequence is the red spheres of your profile. They're really all about your relationships and the suffering you go through to deal with your karma, your dharma, and to get to your purpose. So it's fascinating to see what your attraction field is. And mine was control to authority to valor. And I'm like, okay, I see how I want to control the world to keep myself safe, but how can I step into the higher levels of control, which is authority, being respected as a leader, and valor really is just that courageous warrior, just bowing to the divine and handing over the sword, saying, I am unity. I'm with, my God self. I'm not going to fight anymore. But you've already reached this beautiful warrior status of being on top, but then surrendering to the divine. So that's my attraction field. And it's interesting to see what, what's coming in for that. So the Gene Keys is a great way to start. Just one-on-one coaching. I do, helping, especially women, I think it's easier for me to work with people who are like looking for a change, or who've walked in my shoes with maybe trying to step into their spiritual being, and maybe stepping out of a marriage, and that's super hard, or dealing with neurodiverse children, also adopted. So really dealing with that whole feeling of separation that, it's not really acknowledged a lot, that, as a baby, you still have these memories, and then they think it's not a big deal, just because I went into a loving family as a newborn, but dealing with some of that separation, that you feel at a cellular level. So if any, a lot of topics for people, I can walk them through. Oh, and the course is on there. It's Awakening to the Real You. And it's really for those people who have been on the journey a little bit, and it kind of gets into the science a little bit of our holographic universe, the miraculous human body. It's not just, what we see on the surface or what the medical professionals see, because it's so holistic. And the DNA are, to me, just the antennas for the frequencies you're tuning into in the field. And we have more than 3 strands. We really have 12 or more than that, that just aren't coding. Junk DNA isn't junk. It's just non-coding. And when you wake up spiritually, you start coding that DNA. So that's all in the course if you want to learn more about that.
I love that. I love that. And I could talk to you for hours about DNA and other such things, but I am so excited to share you with my audience. And I'm really excited about what you're offering because I feel like a lot of people could benefit. So all of Rebecca's links are below. You know how to reach her. And hopefully you'll join us here again at this community, this table, this conversation, or over at Together We Seek online, where so many of the lightworkers come to connect and share all the things that they have in store. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was a
Oh,
pleasure.
so good. Thank you.